In the waning years of the Ptolemaic dynasty, as the Mediterranean world trembled under the growing shadow of Rome, Alexandria stood as a beacon of learning, wealth, and power. It was into this world, in 69 BCE, that Cleopatra, the seventh Philopator, was born, a princess who would become the last active ruler of the Ptolemaic kingdom of Egypt. Ptolemy XII Auletes, Cleopatra's father, provides us with crucial context for understanding the world that shaped his famous daughter. A ruler whose very legitimacy was questioned, Auletes, the flute player, a nickname that spoke to his love of musical competitions, faced constant challenges to his authority. His reign was marked by a desperate balancing act between maintaining Egyptian independence and courting Roman favor, a political tightrope that his daughter would later walk with far greater skill. In 58 BCE, when Cleopatra was merely 11 years old, she witnessed her father's humiliating exile from Alexandria. The citizens, enraged by his excessive taxation and perceived submission to Rome, had driven him from the throne. It took 3 years and an enormous bribe of 6,000 talents to the Roman general Gabinius to restore him to power. These early years provided Cleopatra with her first lessons in the price of power and the complicated relationship between Egypt and Rome. The Alexandria of Cleopatra's youth was unlike any other city in the ancient world. Founded by Alexander the Great in 331 BCE, it had grown into a metropolis of perhaps 300,000 people. The great library stood as the crown jewel of intellectual pursuit, housing hundreds of thousands of scrolls. The lighthouse of Pharos, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, guided ships into a harbor bustling with trade vessels from across the known world. In this cosmopolitan environment, young Cleopatra received an education that would have been extraordinary even by the standards of the Ptolemaic court. She studied at the Mount Sion, learning from the greatest scholars of her time. Historical records indicate she mastered at least 9 languages, including Egyptian, making her the first Ptolemaic ruler in 3 centuries to speak the language of her subjects. Her studies encompassed rhetoric, philosophy, astronomy, and medicine, subjects she would later author treatises on. The Egypt of the late Ptolemaic period was a study in contrasts. While Alexandria gleamed with marble and gold, the countryside remained essentially unchanged from pharaonic times. The annual flood of the Nile still dictated the rhythm of life, and Egyptian temples still conducted their ancient rituals. Yet the kingdom was also deeply embedded in the complex web of Mediterranean politics and trade. By 51 BCE, when Cleopatra became co-ruler at the age of 18 following her father's death, Egypt was nominally independent, but increasingly under Roman influence. The kingdom's vast grain reserves and strategic location made it crucial to Roman interests. The massive debt incurred by Ptolemy XII to Rome, estimated at 17.5 million drachmas, hung like a sword over the kingdom. Cleopatra's early reign was marked by careful political maneuvering. Following tradition, she was married to her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII, who was merely 10 years old at the time. The arrangement was typical of Ptolemaic dynastic practice, but it set the stage for future conflict. Court eunuchs and advisors, particularly the powerful Pothinus, sought to manipulate the young Ptolemy against his more capable sister. Between 51 and 48 BCE, Cleopatra demonstrated remarkable administrative ability. Records from this period show her actively managing Egypt's complex bureaucracy, dealing with a severe Nile flood failure, and navigating regional politics. However, her determination to rule in her own right, rather than as a figurehead, put her on a collision course with the powerful court faction backing her brother. The situation reached a crisis point in 48 BCE, when Cleopatra was forced to flee Alexandria. This exile, though bitter, would set the stage for her dramatic return, carried into Caesar's presence wrapped in a carpet, according to Plutarch's famous account. It was a moment that would transform both her life and the course of Egyptian history. This young woman, not yet 30, had already absorbed lessons that would serve her throughout her reign. The importance of personal charisma, the power of education, the delicate balance of Egyptian and Greek culture, and the growing shadow of Rome. She had learned that survival required more than just royal blood. It demanded intelligence, adaptability, and an iron will masked by charm. Cleopatra emerged from these early years not just as a queen, but as a ruler who understood that power came in many forms. She would need all of these lessons in the tumultuous years ahead, as she sought to preserve both her throne and Egypt's independence in an increasingly Roman world. As Cleopatra navigated the treacherous waters of Mediterranean politics, she demonstrated an extraordinary ability to forge alliances that transcended mere romantic connections. Her relationships with powerful figures were carefully orchestrated performances on the stage of international politics, where personal charm served as a weapon as potent as any army. When Julius Caesar arrived in Alexandria in 48 BCE, pursuing Pompey in the wake of Rome's civil war, he found a city torn by dynastic struggle. Cleopatra's legendary entrance, smuggled past her brother's guards inside a carpet, or, more accurately, a sack of bedding, according to Plutarch, demonstrated her flair for dramatic timing. What followed was more than a mere romance. It was a masterclass in political alliance building. Caesar's intervention in the Alexandrian Civil War, 48 to 47 BCE, proved decisive. However, Cleopatra's influence extended beyond merely securing Roman support. During this period, she secured recognition as sole ruler of Egypt, established a personal alliance with Rome's most powerful figure, gained Roman citizenship, secured the execution of her rival sister, Arsinoe IV, bore Caesar's son, Caesar Ion, strengthening her position. The relationship transformed both parties. Caesar erected a golden statue of Cleopatra in the Temple of Venus Genetrix in Rome, an unprecedented honor for a foreign monarch. Meanwhile, Cleopatra adopted the epithet Thea Neoterra, the new goddess, directly challenging Roman political sensibilities. Less celebrated, but equally crucial were Cleopatra's Eastern diplomatic initiatives. Between 47 and 41 BCE, she maintained diplomatic relations with the Nabatean kingdom, strengthened ties with Cyprus, reintegrating it into Ptolemaic control, negotiated with Parthian emissaries, established trade agreements with Arabian kingdoms, maintained influence in Syria and Judea. These Eastern connections would prove vital during her later alliance with Mark Antony, providing resources and support for their ambitious Eastern Empire project. The relationship between Cleopatra and Mark Antony, beginning in 41 BCE, represented the apex of her diplomatic strategy. Their partnership went far beyond the sensationalized romance portrayed by later Roman propagandists. Together, they envisioned a unified Eastern Mediterranean empire that would rival Rome itself. The Donations of Alexandria, an event in 34 BCE where Mark Antony and Cleopatra formally divided territories among their children, revealed the scope of their ambition. Caesar Ion was proclaimed King of Kings. Alexander Helios received Armenia and Parthia. Cleopatra Selene was given Cyrenaica and Libya. Ptolemy Philadelphus gained Syria and Cilicia. Cleopatra herself was named Queen of Kings. This bold reorganization of the East represented a direct challenge to Roman authority, effectively creating an alternative power center in Alexandria. Cleopatra's diplomatic network extended beyond the major powers. She cultivated relationships with Herod the Great of Judea, though their relationship was complex and often hostile. The king of Mauritania, various client kings in Asia Minor, the rulers of Media Atropatene, and Arabian tribal leaders, though fragmented, who also played a part in her political relationships. Her court in Alexandria became a center of diplomatic activity, hosting envoys from across the known world. She leveraged Egypt's grain supply and vast wealth to maintain this network, understanding that economic power could be as persuasive as military might. These relationships came at a cost. Each alliance required careful maintenance and often significant financial investment. The massive building projects, military campaigns, and lavish displays of wealth that characterized her reign strained even Egypt's considerable resources. Moreover, each relationship created ripples that affected others. Her alliance with Antony, while powerful, ultimately provided Octavian with the propaganda tool he needed to turn Roman opinion against both of them. The image of Cleopatra as an Eastern seductress, corrupting virtuous Romans, was largely a creation of this period. By 31 BCE, the complex web of relationships Cleopatra had spent decades building faced its ultimate test. The Battle of Actium would determine whether her vision of a Mediterranean empire centered on Alexandria could survive against the rising power of Octavian's Rome. In the end, these relationships, particularly with Caesar and Antony, have often overshadowed Cleopatra's broader diplomatic achievements. Yet they reveal a ruler who understood that power in the ancient world required more than military might or inherited authority. It required the ability to build and maintain relationships across cultural and political boundaries, a skill at which Cleopatra excelled until the very end. History has often relegated Cleopatra to a supporting role in the stories of powerful men, but a closer examination reveals a woman who carefully constructed her own narrative and wielded power according to her unique vision. Her choices, strategies, and ultimate fate demonstrate remarkable personal agency within the constraints of her time. Cleopatra understood the power of public image in ways that were remarkably sophisticated for her era. She carefully crafted different personas for different audiences. For Egyptians, she embraced the role of Isis incarnate, appearing in traditional pharaonic regalia and participating in ancient rituals. Temple reliefs at Dendera show her in the traditional pose of pharaoh, making offerings to the gods. She took the title Philopatrus, lover of her country, emphasizing her connection to Egypt despite her Greek heritage. For her Hellenistic subjects, she presented herself as the embodiment of the enlightened ruler, patronizing scholars and maintaining Alexandria's position as a center of learning. She wrote medical treatises, conducted scientific experiments, and supported the museum and library of Alexandria. For Romans, she projected an image of exotic but civilized authority, combining Eastern magnificence with Greek sophistication. She mastered the art of what we might today call soft power, understanding that cultural influence could be as effective as military might. Diplomatic achievements aside, Cleopatra was also a skilled administrator. Her reign saw remarkable administrative innovations as she reformed the currency system to maintain stability during periods of crisis, modernized tax collection methods, invested in irrigation projects to improve agricultural yields, developed new trade routes through the Red Sea, and established new industrial centers for papyrus and glass production. These reforms demonstrated her practical understanding of power's foundations. While her male counterparts often focused on military conquest, Cleopatra understood that economic strength was crucial for political survival. Likewise, Cleopatra was a formidable military leader who personally commanded naval forces and demonstrated significant tactical abilities. Her military prowess was particularly evident in her command of naval operations, where she not only supervised preparations but also took direct control of ship squadrons. Her understanding of Mediterranean naval power and active participation in military campaigns, including the Battle of Actium in 31 BCE, showcased her hands-on approach to military leadership, even though the particular engagement ended in defeat. Perhaps nowhere was Cleopatra's agency more evident than in her death. Facing defeat by Octavian in 30 BCE, she chose the manner and timing of her end. The traditional account of her death by ASP Bite reflects her understanding of Egyptian religious symbolism. The uraeus, cobra, was a symbol of divine kingship. Her final actions were carefully staged. She ordered her own mausoleum prepared, arranged for messages to be sent to Octavian, ensured her version of events would survive, and even chose a death that would resonate with Egyptian religious traditions. By choosing a method of death that connected to traditions and preparing every detail, she transformed what could have been a moment of defeat into a powerful final statement. Modern scholarship has begun to recognize Cleopatra's reign as a case study in how individual agency operated in the ancient world. She was neither the seductress of Roman propaganda nor the tragic romantic heroine of later literature. Instead, she was a ruler who understood the tools available to her and used them with remarkable skill. Her true legacy lies not in the legends that grew up around her, but in her demonstration that power could be exercised in many ways. She showed that cultural influence, economic management, and careful image crafting could be as effective as traditional military might. In the end, Cleopatra created a reality of her own, making within the constraints of her time. While she ultimately could not prevent Egypt's absorption into the Roman Empire, she succeeded in living and dying on her own terms, leaving behind a legacy that continues to captivate and challenge us more than 2 millennia later.